I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano, and the verdict is coming on the criminal prosecution of Ken Lewis, Hank Paulson, John Thane, Ben Bernanke, and Jeffrey Lacker, the president of the Federal Reserve of Richmond. Here's the question. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Chair of the Federal Reserve have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and the federal laws. Among those laws is the obligation of management of publicly traded corporations to inform shareholders in a meaningful way of the risks upon all extraordinary corporate activity, including major acquisitions. So when will this group of rogue bankers be brought to justice? Here are the facts. The acquisition of Merrill Lynch by the Bank of America was surely a major acquisition and an extraordinary corporate act. The president of Bank of America now tells us that the Secretary of the Treasury and the Chair of the Federal Reserve told him not to inform his shareholders that Merrill Lynch was truly a risky investment. As it turns out, when Ken Lewis learned that Merrill Lynch was worth about $17 billion less than the $50 billion amount agreed upon, he attempted to invoke the material adverse change clause in the contract. This would have given him the option of getting Merrill for $33 billion or walking away from the deal. The former president of Merrill Lynch, John Thane, is not happy that he was fired from Bank of America, even though he left a very wealthy man. But he does not refute Ken Lewis's statements. He only argues that Lewis and the Bank of America folks knew what Merrill Lynch was worth when they bought it. He may have inadvertently opened up a can of worms for himself. Did he, John Thane, knowingly sell an asset to a public company which had received a huge federal investment for $17 billion less than he knew it was worth? The failure of the president of the Bank of America to have revealed the risks of the acquisition to the shareholders, as the law requires, and his failure to exercise that MAC clause were acts of fraud and directly violate laws enforced by the SEC. As for Paulson and Bernanke, they were participants in a conspiracy to defraud Bank of America shareholders. We also know now that the Federal Reserve in D.C. and its Richmond Bank chief in Richmond threatened to fire Ken Lewis and his management team if the Bank of America did not follow through with the Merrill Lynch acquisition for the full $50 billion. You know what this is? It is plain and simple extortion. It is the threat to perform a lawful act in order to compel a person to exercise his free will adverse to his own interests or adverse to his fiduciary obligations. Unfortunately for Mr. Lewis, the government made me do it defense is not a defense to a criminal indictment. So, Ken Lewis, Hank Paulson, John Thane, Ben Bernanke, Jeffrey Lacker, the president of the Federal Reserve in Richmond, should all be considered candidates for prosecution for extortion, conspiracy to extort, criminal fraud, and the theft of honest services. And if they're convicted, they should go to jail. If you want to hear more of my opinions on topics such as this, check out my latest book, Dred Scott's Revenge, A Legal History of Race and Freedom in America, available in bookstores nationwide. You can also tune into my nationally syndicated radio show, Brian and the Judge, every weekday from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, and to my online program, Freedom Watch, every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on FoxNews.com. And don't forget, you can always catch me right here on the Fox News Channel and on the Fox Business Network throughout the day, every day. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano, and that's my verdict.